Hey, Archie, I always think that I need to work until at least 65, maybe even 70. Is it possible that it could be a good idea that I retire early?
Well, Rob, it could be a great idea. Let's talk about it. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, we're going to talk to you about 5 reasons why you should consider retiring early, which is sort of an exciting topic because a lot of people have this as a life goal and many reasons, but there are 5 that we think you should consider. Now, there are many challenges that come with early retirement, and we did an episode on that, specifically why it's so hard to retire early, which you should check out because if you want to attempt this goal, you need to know what you're kind of getting yourself into.
Yeah, planning becomes much more important, I think, if you're going to try to pull this off and retire early, for sure.
Planning from a long way off, too, so the more time you have, the better.
It's also something your financial planner probably isn't likely to tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Number one, it's a risky recommendation for a financial planner to say, I think you should go ahead and retire 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years early. It also means that if they're compensated based on the assets that they manage and you start drawing those assets down, then they're going to get a pay cut probably. So there are a couple of reasons why you may not get this recommendation from your financial planner, but we've got 5 reasons why it might make sense if you can do it.
The first one is, I think, the reason why most people attempt this, and it's about time, right? It's your most valuable asset because you only have a finite amount. And so for many of us, a lot of our time is spent working at, typically at least 40 hours a week, often more. And so what you're doing by retiring early is taking control of your time again, and you're going to get that back and you can use it on whatever you want. If you've planned well, the idea is that you're not tied to the desk. You are now free to use your time however you want.
I think that's such an interesting thing. When I was younger, I remember I had a much older mentor who was probably in retrospect, was probably at retirement age at the time. And I was on a business trip with him, and he said, Rob, if I can tell you one thing that might be helpful, remember your most valuable asset is time. He's telling me this. I'm thinking about it at that time, and I'm going, noted, and my most valuable asset's my car. I had an abundance of time. In fact, I didn't have that many people to talk to.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint at that point, and I didn't really have the perspective of being older.
Yeah.
And now I'm older and I realize it is absolutely time.
Yeah, and I mean this can mean so many different things to different people. Like we said, I mean, when you're preparing for retirement and throughout your life, you're trading your time for money. Because money is important, right? It's obviously, we need it to put food on the table, have a roof over our heads, to send our kids to school and make sure they get an education. We use it for fun things like vacations. And so we're trading.
Yeah, it's the gas that makes life's experience possible, right? You think of life as a journey. Well, money is the gas.
Yeah. And you don't suddenly not need money at any point in your life. You'll always need it. But if you can plan well and accumulate enough, that can give you then the freedom to stop trading your time for money and start using your time and trading it for things that really matter to you, whether it's spending time with your family, whether it's traveling, volunteering your time and giving back to the community, whatever it is. And so you can trade that time for meaning.
Right.
And you have much, much more of it. Another one would be your health. You only have your health for so long. You only really know that you have it at the moment. Things can happen really quickly and change that.
Well, even if you're healthy as you get older, you don't have as much energy.
Yeah.
As evidenced by older people's desire to take afternoon naps, right?
Yeah.
On the weekend, I'm most interested in whether or not I'm going to be able to get a nap in, right?
Yeah.
So
Going to bed at 7 o'clock.
yeah. So you have less energy. You may not feel as good if you really get out and exert yourself. You may have, and if let's say you injure yourself, it takes longer to recover from it. So even if you're healthy, you may start to see some changes in the way you feel and the amount of energy you have. So if you postpone retirement to a point where you just feel terrible, you're probably not going to want to do some of the things that you think you might like to do, like traveling.
Yeah.
Or
And a lot of
hiking the AT, you're not going to probably do that if you wait till you're too old.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people end up basically having a full-time job in visiting doctors, going to their doctor's appointments, as they get older in retirement. So if you wait until you're at the point where you don't feel comfortable being far away from your doctor, or you're constantly, going to different doctor's appointments, you want to, one of the great reasons to retire early is to retire with plenty of time, between now and when that starts to happen, so that you're not tied down by anything. And the older you get, the more health problems start to come up. So yeah, I think that's a great one. I mean, I heard a saying recently. In fact, it was Jimmy, another host on the show, I think, said this. He said, you can have, if you have your health, you have many problems. If you don't have your health, you have one problem. So, yeah, anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So here's an interesting one. When you start getting closer to retirement, you're at a point in your career where you are the most expensive to your employer that you ever are.
Yeah.
Right? You're also at a point where you're the most vulnerable if you lose your job.
Right.
Unless you've planned and you're in a good position. So one of the things that we see happening so much, there's so much consolidation in corporate America, with private equity firms buying smaller businesses and rolling them up, and now they're getting certain efficiencies so they don't need to have as many employees. And so who are they going to cut? If they can cut the most expensive employee, they're going to look to do that.
Yeah.
And that might be you if you're in your mid to late 50s. Now, it's true that you're considered as being part of a protected class, so they have to be very careful in the way they let you go. But you may have a target on your back if that were to happen. We also see it happening big time right now in the federal government with all of the efforts that are happening to cut government spending. So, we are, if you're close to retirement, you may not be as secure in your job as you were.
Yeah.
So planning for an early retirement, even if you don't want to do it, might be really smart.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like being 5 to 10 years away from retirement and having confidence that I could make it work now if I needed to. Or if it's just, if I got laid off, I could find something that paid a lot less and be fine. There's some peace of mind knowing that, even if, you kind of want to work longer.
And another thing that can happen is if you've been doing the same job for 30 to 35 years and you're late in your career, you might be kind of sick of doing it. You might be experiencing burnout. If you are, your performance might drop. That might put you more at risk of losing that job. You might be happy not to have it simply because you're sick of it. But what do you do about the lost income? So there are a lot of considerations as you get later in your career you need to consider.
Yeah. Another one, to think about is spending. And, there's good reason to believe that if you retire early, you'll probably spend more. But there's also some reason to believe that you might spend less. So for most of us, one of our primary expenses in early retirement will be healthcare. But if you're younger, right, you may be kind of offsetting that with your health. If you're spending more time taking care of yourself, you don't have to go to work 9 to 5. It's easier to find time to exercise and be more active. So that there may be sort of an offsetting effect there. You don't have the expenses of a commute, of, buying clothing for work, which can be expensive, eating out, that sort of thing. So you may find, depending on your spending habits now, you may find that it tend to drop off.
The one caveat is that buying health insurance before you're age 65, buying health insurance in the private marketplace
is pretty expensive.
You're going to get sticker shock when you check it out.
Yeah.
So you got to plan.
So certain expenses may be lower, others may be quite a bit higher. So it's impossible to say one way or another, but it probably depends a lot on the type of spender you are.
So
and the type of retirement you want.
So that's reason 4. You might be able to spend less than you're thinking you'll spend. Reason 5 I love because it sort of helps potentially bridge the gap, and that's a phased retirement.
Yeah.
Sort of think of it as like pre-retirement.
Yeah.
Where you're sort of, you got one foot into retirement, you still have some earned income, right? Maybe some benefits.
Yeah. I mean, you go into consulting. You've had a long career, developed some expertise. You can monetize that and share that with others. You could just work part-time. You may find, a lot of people find that there's a shock of going from working to not working that is kind of uncomfortable, because what am I going to do with all my time? I found a lot of purpose and meaning in my work.
A lot of my friends and my personal interactions happen at work.
Yeah.
Now I'm lonely.
Yeah. So having a phased sort of, slow move into retirement, it can be a great thing to do. Even if it means filling up your time with volunteering and work that isn't paid, I think it's important not to just, especially with early retirement, it's important have your life planned out, not just what am I going to do with my time, and start making commitments.
Archie, something you said in an earlier episode about this very thing was that you can't just retire from something. You need to retire to something. You got to have a purpose. And we all, I'm sure people watching this or listening to this have noticed this too, but we have seen it for sure, where people will retire, usually men. They retire to a life of leisure, where they get into the every evening cocktail lifestyle. They spend a lot of time watching television, probably too much time watching cable news. It affects their sense of well-being, their sense of happiness. It absolutely affects their sense of purpose and just their general health. A sedentary life with no purpose, that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and right now there are powerful, well-funded media companies that are doing everything they can to get and keep your attention. And all of a sudden, you're going to have a lot more time available for them to try to compete for. And it's so important not to let them. And they're good at it. I mean, we all know. We all have a phone in our pockets. We have a TV at home, probably a computer or iPad as well. And they're very good at getting and keeping our attention, but it can be so devastating to your happiness, your mental health. And that's something you have to be careful about.
I know, and we hear from those people who are relatively newly retired. We get a little hiccup in the markets or the financial situation. They're watching a lot of news.
Yeah.
They're getting their politics maybe tied up with their finances, and then they're calling us.
Yeah.
And we've got clients that actually reach out every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a sort of a reset that has to happen emotionally, and sort of how are you going to manage your happiness in retirement? Because you can't do that if you're sitting on the couch and watching cable news all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it'll eat up your time, and it's hard to find a sense of meaning and purpose, living like that. So it's very important to retire to something and have this planned out before you go to retirement.
So basically, an early retirement might be a great thing, and it's worth considering and finding out if you can afford to do it.
Absolutely.
Right. But you can't, it can't just be about not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it as just being permanently on vacation, it's probably not going to be a great decision to retire early.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe if that's the case, it may be time to look at a career change, or a sabbatical as opposed to early retirement. You can plan for a sabbatical, take a year, really do some soul searching and think what you want to do and make a career change. Because that is the thing. I would say if your main objective, I don't want to work anymore, I just want, permanent vacation, I would say probably something wrong with the work, and maybe not a good fit. I mean,
yeah, consider doing something like there's a program which I did in high school called Outward Bound. It was a mountaineering school. It was fantastic. Learned a lot about myself as a teenager. You can actually do Outward Bound type programs in your 50s and maybe even into your 60s, and you go and you spend a month hiking and mountain climbing and whitewater rafting, whatever it is you're capable of doing, but you're off the grid. You're with other people that are doing exactly the same thing, and you can reimagine and reset the next chapter of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be true if you've come to find out that the numbers don't work and early retirement isn't possible, but maybe a short sabbatical and a career pivot is and could be a really great option. So
yeah, and a month or so in the woods eating, freeze-dried food is pretty cheap.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
well, I think that's about all we have for today. Remember to check out the episode on early retirement challenges to make sure that if you're thinking about that, you're prepared. But otherwise, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Share it with your family and friends. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.